Welcome, fellow bookworms, to Tibra's Den. My name is Whitney, and today we have my August wrap up. Now, July was not a great month for me as compared to my normal. It was still a good month overall, but just compared to my normal, it was a little bit of a rough month. And August was even worse. So it's not necessarily that I'm in a reading slump. Life has been very hectic lately, just multiple things happening. And so I am in a little bit of autistic burnout, which means nothing is capturing my interest. Like my brain just does not want to engage. And that includes with reading stuff. So I did get 9 books read, and of the books I read, I really enjoyed the majority of them. So on that aspect, it was a good month. It's just, I have a lot of books again that are going back on the shelves, even more so than last month, which is always a little sad because all the books I do really want to read. And so it's always a little bit sad when I don't get to something, knowing that, it's going to be a little while before I get to it and have a chance to pick it up again. But, life is what it is, and I'm wanting to give myself a little grace when it comes to like autistic burnout and such. I've only been diagnosed with autism for a couple of years, and so it's been a learning process to just give myself grace and not be so hard on myself when I really don't have the motivation to do anything. So there's that, but we're gonna go ahead and go into the stats, and then I will cover the books I didn't get to, and then we'll get into my star ratings. I did, keep track of what I read each day on the calendar like I have been, but I didn't average out how many pages per day or anything like that yet. There was a lot of days I didn't read anything, so it's probably a pretty low average, and my average page count is pretty low too. So stats page count was 2,342. I had no audio hours. I read 7 fiction, 2 nonfiction. All 9 were physical. Again, no audio, and one of those was a reread for me. As far as genres, again, these overlap, so even though there's only 9 books, there's multiple genres. We had 3 middle grade, 2 classics, 2 fantasy, 1 children's, 1 LGBTQ+, 1 true crime, 1 travel, 1 romance, 1 memoir, 1 history, 1 contemporary, and 1 biography. My top moods were actually a little different this month, which, was a nice change. They were lighthearted, hopeful, and adventurous. You can tell I was going for just stuff that was going to make me feel good and kind of lift my spirits up a little bit. So there is that. I did not have any DNFs, which was fantastic. So let's go ahead and go into the books I did not get to. So first up, we have The Lost City of Atlantis, and it needed to be a mystery element in the book. It didn't have to be a mystery, it just had to have a mystery element. And for that, I chose Clandestine by Julia Ross. This one, I think, there's a duke that has a dark secret, and Sarah is the main character, and she's trying to rescue her cousin. So there's kind of multiple mysteries going on in this one. Like I said, didn't get to it, so this is one I found at the thrift store and not necessarily one I was looking for to read. But I did find it at a thrift store, and so it's been on my shelves. And it does sound interesting, and I would like to read it at some point. But for now, it goes back on the shelves, and the prompt does go back into the honey jar. So there's that. Next up, we had Red Rising, which this was for Gopher, and it was Whistles and Wheezes. So it needed to be an alliteration. So I went with Red Rising because that's an alliteration, and did not get to this. This one I am very, very interested in. I am gonna try to get it on a TBR and read it before the end of the year. But for now, my September TBR is already set, and so this one, I can't roll over everything. So this one is gonna go back on the shelves. But I am very, very interested in still reading this. So keep an eye on future TBRs, see if I can get it on there. Then we had, this is Dumbo, which was a sad book. And it's funny because I got Dumbo sad book and Eeyore gloomy book back to back. But this one I did not get read, and that is Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. Again, another one I would still like to read. I might try to see if I can get it onto my October TBR. But it's not high priority for that, so we'll see what happens. But I would still really, really like to read this. I've been seeing it going on several TBRs recently, and so I definitely want to read it and, be able to have a part in the conversation about this book. But we'll see when I can get to that one. Then another fail for this book. This is the second time I got Hercules, which was Zero to Hero. This isn't the same prompt that I had for it for before, but it is Jade, Fire, Gold by June C.L. Tan. Again, really interested in reading this one. The synopsis doesn't give you a lot on this edition. I think it's Fairy Loot or Lumicrate, one of those. I found this at a thrift store as well. And the synopsis on this one is just really short. It doesn't give you a whole lot, so I'm not as excited for it. But it's really pretty, and I do want to read it. So this is not a high priority for the rest of the year, though. So maybe the beginning of next year, we shall see what happens. Then this one is definitely one I'm going to try to get on my October TBR. It's not going to be as a rollover or anything. If I can get it on there, great. It might be an extra otherwise, but the prompt was Cursed to be an Animal, which is the Swan Princess. And I chose Mongrels by Stephen Graham Jones for this. I've read The Only Good Indians by this author, and I really, really want to read this one. I do think it's perfect for October, so this is going to be a high priority to try to get it in onto October's TBR, but the prompt is just going to go straight back into the honey jar. And this one, like I said, if I can make it fit a prompt, great. Otherwise, it might just be an extra in October because spooky vibes. Definitely got to give it a try. Then one I was really looking forward to. I might still try to sneak it in September. It's not an official rollover, but the prompt was Hansel and Gretel, and it was a misleading antagonist. And I went with Soul of the Deep by Natasha Bowen for this one. I loved Skin of the Sea. I really, really enjoyed it. And one of the gods in that book was a little bit misleading, which is why I chose this one for that prompt. But like I said, September is already kind of set. It's already a big one. And so while I might try to squeak this one in, it's not an official rollover by any means. So there's that. Then another one, I've been trying to continue the series for several months now, and it was just a bookworm and it was a free pick. So you would have thought I would have picked this one up, but it didn't have the vibes I was looking for. That's Famine by Thalassa. And I loved Pestilence, which is the first one in the Four Horsemen series. War, I still gave it 5 stars, but the character wise, it wasn't my favorite. So I've been really, really interested to read this one. And then Death. Again, another one I might try to squeak onto October and maybe even September if I can. Like, September is my birthday month. I do have a TBR, but it's going to be kind of be mood read as well. Um, so we'll see. I do want to try to get this on in the next 2 months, but it's not officially rolled over or anything like that. So we will see what happens there. And then we had lots of books I didn't get to. We had T.I.G.G.R., which was an ABC author. I did get the letter F. And so for this one, I chose Lucy Foley, and this is the book of Lost and Found. One I found at the little free library, so it's kind of beat up, but I had heard of it, and so I picked it up, and just wasn't high priority this month. So this is another one. I read Daughter of the Pirate King and Daughter of the Siren Queen by this author, so I was really interested in reading something else by her. And we had Elsa and Anna, and it was Insidious Takeover. And for this, I chose Blade of Secrets by Tricia Levenseller. So again, I really like the writing style in those, and they were a fun, good time. And this one sounds really interesting. It's again not high priority, so I don't know that I'll get it on any TBRs this year, but I'll definitely try for next year if I don't. But I am interested in that one. The next was for There are 2 unusable discs. So if you watch my game, at the end I pull color discs to determine where I move to. And at the end, if I pull a color that I can't move forward, I just put those to the side, and then however many discs there are left at the end, I have to do a book based on that. And there was 2 this past round for August, and so I chose Namesake by Adrienne Young, which is the second one. The first one is Fable, and again, really enjoyed Fable and was looking forward to this. So this one, Soul of the Deep, and Famine are the 3 that I'm gonna try to sneak in as extras somewhere in the next couple months, but I just don't know if I will be able to. So now that was it for the ones that I did not read and are not officially getting rolled over. I have 2 more I did not read, but I am rolling over. The first one was Pocahontas, and it was Strong Ties to Nature. And so for this one, I had chosen Braiding Sweetgrass. This is one I was really interested in. Finally bought it, and then still haven't had a chance to read it. And when I think like Sweetgrass, I think September for whatever reason. And so I'm not quite mad that I didn't get this one. And this is going to be probably my mandatory rollover. Maybe the other one might be it. I don't know because I'm interested in both of them. But this one just gives me more September vibes for whatever reason. And so, yeah, I'm going to be rolling this one over for sure. So this will stay with the book, and then if I do finish this one in September, then that one will be put aside. If I don't, then it will go back in the honey jar at that point. So there's that one, and then the other one I'm rolling over um, it was a bookworm, and it was featured in a show or movie, and so I went with the Gilmore Girls reading list. And this one wasn't actually on that list that I could find, but the first one and the third one in the series were. So it's like it counts. And that was The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien, which is, of course, book 2 in the Lord of the Rings series. And so, yeah, I still really want to read this one. And so it's the last day of August as I'm filming this, and so I might go ahead and start this tonight. Um, but yeah, because I think I want to read Braiding Sweetgrass closer to the middle of September, and so this one will probably be my mandatory rollover, which is kind of my form of punishment, which is really not a punishment, and it just means I have to complete this one before I can start in on any of my official books for September. So that one's gonna roll over. Now we have the books that I actually read. And so 2 of these were rollovers, and 2 of them were just extra books. So, I had a lot of books to read, and I chose to read something different. So, first up is a book I got sent by the author to read and review, and unfortunately, it didn't quite hit for me. I only gave this one 2.5 stars. It wasn't quite a 3-star for me just because it took me way too long to read. And, yes, I was struggling with autistic burnout and such, and so I was taking longer to read a lot of books. But this should have been a quick read based on what it's about and everything like that. So basically, in this one, you have Mabel, and she's kind of rumored to be a witch. And her grandmother passes away, and she finds this book and walks through fire and goes into the unseen, and she learns that there's the unseen and the seen world, and in the seen world, her territory, or whatever you want to call it, is covered in darkness. And so she has to fight this darkness. It is Christian fiction fantasy. It wasn't so much the story, it was kind of the writing style for me that didn't quite hit. And I do have a video where I talk about this book specifically, along with another book that was sent to me by another author. So I just kind of highlight this author and that author and talk about the books they sent me. So if you want to know more about my thoughts on this one, you can definitely check out that video. But yeah, it's more the writing style. There's not a lot of context given. It just jumps right in. It's very fast paced. The descriptions in the book, like, very descriptive as far as like what's visually happening, but not a lot of context given. Otherwise, there's a lot of characters, which you don't get a lot of depth to them because it's just moving so fast, and I had a really hard time keeping characters straight because of that. So it was more the writing style for me. I think the story itself was really interesting with Mabel and having, and she does learn something along this journey she takes, that teaches her a little bit more about herself because she was raised by her grandmother. She never knew her parents. And so she learned something, and that helps her know herself a little bit better. And then, the fighting of, like I said, kind of good versus evil, the light trying to fight the dark. There's good angels and dark angels. So the story itself was really cool, and the vivid descriptions were really cool. It was just the overall writing style and pacing that didn't quite sit well with me. So that was, like I said, 2.5 stars for that one. Then we have 2 3 stars. The first was a rollover. Was actually my genre-thon pick for July. I didn't quite finish it, so that is A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson. This one, I love like naturey books. Like I just really enjoy them. I really liked he included like some history on the national parks, which was interesting. The problem with this one for me was some of the humor. Like he's there with his friend, he's doing this walk with his friend, and some of the way they talked about women at some points was just kind of disgusting, and a little bit outdated. And I get, he's with his buddy, whatever, but he wrote it in a book, and it was in the 90s. This was written in the 90s. So yeah, just kind of some of the humor I didn't really like, but I really like the nature aspect, and kind of some of the history of the national parks and the trails and such. So that one got 3. Then we had, this one was for my character pick, which I got Pooh Bear, I believe. And so Pooh Bear is either a classic or a comfort read, I want to say. And so for this one, I picked Heidi, obviously. And so in this one, Heidi goes and lives with her grandfather, and then her aunt pulls her away, and sends her to live in the city. And all Heidi wants to do is get back to her grandfather. I really enjoyed the first portion of this book, but when Heidi goes to the city, then she's kind of introduced to God, and just kind of the lessons around God was a little bit off-putting for me. Like, oh, you just have to believe and then everything will be okay. Like all your problems will be solved. And that's really not how it works. Now, granted, this was written in what, like the 1800s, late 1800s, I want to say. Um, yeah, 1880. So, like that time period again, religion was very big. So I understand, but I just didn't like that overall message, and so it kind of turned me off the book a little bit. But it was still really fun and enjoyable. The setting was great. I really like Heidi and her relationship with her grandfather because her grandfather's kind of an old grump. So, overall, a good book. Like I said, 3 stars means I enjoyed it. It just, there was something that kind of rubbed me the wrong way about the book. So that's where that one falls. So that's it for the 3 stars, which isn't bad. Then I had 3 4 stars. So first up, I actually finished this morning and cried my eyes out, and that is Anne of Green Gables by Ellen Montgomery. I've known about Anne for a long time. My grandma is a big Anne of Green Gables fan, and so she's always told me to watch the adaptation, the original, one, not the new Netflix one, obviously. And I never watched any adaptation until the Netflix one, and I really enjoyed that. And then when I found these at the thrift store, I already had this one, but I didn't have the other next two. And so when I found the 3 at the thrift store, I picked them up. And this was perfect. This was the genre-thon read for August because it's back to school. So to either read a middle grade, children's, or a coming of age kind of story, and this one definitely kind of checks those boxes. And I definitely say that like the show captured the essence of Anne so well. The reason this wasn't quite 5 stars for me was it is a little bit long-winded as far, but that's how Anne speaks too. She's very long-winded. And so that's why I didn't quite hit, because I don't like long-winded writing. But I really enjoyed Anne. I really enjoyed the characters. They were very familiar to me just from the show and hearing my grandma talk about them and other people talk about them all these years. Um, so yeah, I really enjoyed it overall. It's just I don't typically like long-windedness, and so about 50 pages, I would read about 50 pages and then I would need a break from it. And Anne was a lot more intense in the book than on the show. Like, I definitely think they captured Anne well on the show, but that intensity came through more in the book for me for whatever reason. And so I struggled with that a little bit, because I know if I met Anne in real life, I would be completely overwhelmed by her. So that with the long-windedness kind of dropped it down for me, but I still really, really loved it. And I definitely, if you're one like me who haven't read Anne of Green Gables, I definitely recommend you pick it up. So then we had, which actually, looking at it objectively, Anne probably should have been above this one, but as far as enjoyment, my star ratings are purely on enjoyment. And as far as that goes, I really did enjoy this. So I read the first one. This is a trilogy. This is a Wildfire Smoke Jumper trilogy by M.L. Buchman. And I just read the first one, which was Wildfire at Dawn. This one was Bookworm, and it was book based on Last Thing I Watched, which I had watched Robin at this time. I had watched Robin at Paperbacks and Paperbacks and Planners. Her channel, I'll leave it down linked below, and I'm sorry if I messed up the channel name, but um yeah, I had watched her TBR video for July, I believe, and she was dealing with a bunch of wildfires and smoke. And I think this is actually supposed to be a fantasy, but I just was like, wildfire smoke had the perfect book. And I enjoyed it, surprisingly enough. So in the first one, you have the two main characters, and he is, of course, a smoke jumper, and then she is an activities director at like this resort. And so they start kind of developing a romance, of course, because it is a romance. And then he's fighting fires. It's the summer season, so he's fighting fires, and they're kind of, learning each other throughout that. And then they get trapped in a fire. So, that kind of ups the stakes. And then there's something more nefarious going on as well. So there's a little kind of mystery of that. I really enjoyed it. I will say, like, I thought for a short, it's 152 pages, I want to say. And as short as it is, I thought the author did really well with the characters. They were likable. Um, they had enough depth that you got a good sense of them. The only thing I will say is it was pretty obvious, as far as the twist and the more nefarious actions. I think that was pretty obvious. And also, so you kind of have the big climax, and then you have another one. And I didn't think that second one was necessary. I think she could have kind of wrapped it up without having that second big event. So I didn't really enjoy that second part. Like, I would have rather it ended with that first part myself. But still, I mean, it's a little romance book. It's not very steamy, but it is a fun time. I did really enjoy it. And like I said, it's lighthearted and just perfect for what I was going for. So there's that. And then the last 4 star, which I really wanted to give a 5 star, uh, and this one was my Eeyore Gloomy book. So this one I had chosen You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty, because she is a widow, and so she's, really still struggling with that, and she ends up developing feelings for this guy. I love the writing style of this. I thought the writing, the pacing, everything was just spot on. And then the author, the way she described like the scenery and the food and everything was just very beautiful. the way the author kind of handles grief in this book, because this book is very grief heavy and focused. I really, really enjoyed that as well. I did not like the main character. I couldn't relate to her very well because she's kind of, I mean, she's grieving and such, and she's trying to figure out how to live after what she went through. But I just like that kind of fast, partying lifestyle. It's just not something I can connect to. And I just felt she was really immature, and with her relationship, it is kind of a taboo as far as you have age gap and sort of boyfriend's father or ex-boyfriend's father, sort of. You'll have to read it to understand why I say sort of. And just how she handled that whole situation, I was just like, and then the way she was with her love interest, she was just very immature at times. And it was like I get you're young and you only had the one relationship. So on one hand, I can kind of understand that, but it kind of got a little bit repetitive. And it was just like, come on, like seriously. So that's what dropped it down. I am definitely interested in trying more of this author. Like I said, I love the writing style. I love the way she did, or they described things. Like I really, really enjoyed that. So I think if it wasn't for kind of the character, this would have been a 5 star for me. And so that's why it's a 4 star. So then I also had 3 5 stars. And so first, you might be wondering why it's 5 star, but it's Take the Reins by Jessica Burkhart, which is the first one in the Canterwood Crest series, which is a middle grade. And so you have Sasha, and she goes to this elite kind of boarding school where they have like this riding program with her horse. And this one was for childhood enemies. Again, this was for the Swan Princess because her and Odette and I forget his name, but they're enemies initially as children. They don't like each other, but they're kind of in an arranged marriage situation initially. So anyway, so I went with this because she's new to the school and they're kind of competing to be on the, I think, advanced team or whatever. And so there's kind of this group of mean girls, this clique of 3 mean girls, and her and the head mean girl, of course, are rivals. And so that's what fulfilled the childhood enemy. And this is a middle grade. It's probably not the greatest writing in the whole world, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. It really brought me back to that age. Like, she's obsessed with lip gloss of all things, and I remember I had a little obsession with lip gloss when I was that age. So it just really, really brought me back to that time. That's right when I was really getting into horses as well. And so it just pulled me back, and I just had such a great time with it, and that's why it ended up getting 5 stars. Like, I loved it. I can't wait. I have the next 3 in the series. There's more than that. But I have the next 3, which I found 2 of them at the thrift store, and then I got the other 2 because I found 2 and 4 at the thrift store, so I needed 1 and 3. Anyway, I really enjoyed it. If you were kind of one of those horsey girls, but you also, had that quirk of like lip gloss or something, and then her anxiety too, like yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. Like, it took me back. So next was not originally on the TBR. It was an extra added, and I added it for I participate in Kim over at Expedition Through Pages, her Tales from True Trails game. And so she does 6 prompts. I tried to fulfill all the prompts, but 2 of them you choose a book for and then submit, and you're kind of racing her down the trails. So for this one of the prompts was Storygraph or Goodreads feed, and I went on both, and this one popped up on both, and I have been wanting to reread these. Um, because again, childhood, they've been on my shelf since I was a child. Like, this one's not the original one I had as a child because my nieces drew on it and like tore pages out and such, so I did have to get the first one later on. But I've had this this copy for years as well. But yeah, I have all the others that I've had since they originally came out. And so yeah, I thought, I've been wanting to reread it anyway. I always watch the movies every year. And so now is the time. And it's just, again, very, very nostalgic for me. And it was so easy to get into and just jump right in, and just kind of take me away for a little bit and not focus on how life is not how I expect it to be. So, so yeah, I really, it's Harry Potter. So, there's that, and then the last one was my other rollover from. This one was from July as well, and this one was Piglet, and it was Face Your Fears. And so this one was my mandatory rollover. I did not stick to reading this before I started the others, only because one, this is nonfiction, two, it's heavy, and I needed it in little doses. But this was obviously my top read of the month. I absolutely love this. This is based on the women that Jack the Ripper killed, and the author did so well. She really focused on the women one. Two, she really takes you through that time period and what life would have looked like for like their class and their station and such. So she kind of gives you that background as well. And then she takes you, like in some cases, she takes you kind of does a little blurb on the parents of the women into their birth and then throughout their life to their death and kind of what led them to being destitute and on the streets and such. So I thought it was very, very well written. So well done. She breaks it down like each part focuses on a different woman, and so it's really easy to know and keep track of things because it's focusing on that woman, instead of like jumping back and forth and such. So I really like the layout of the book, everything. Like this was so good. Definitely, if you've been kind of thinking you might be interested in this, I strongly recommend picking it up because it was really easy to read other than the heavy nature of it. Like I said, I did need to take breaks on occasion because of that, but super easy to read. And it's really interesting. Like, I don't, like, Jack the Ripper, but I didn't realize that not all, but four out of the five were middle-aged women. I thought they were kind of younger, and also the last one, like I didn't realize that there's kind of a debate whether the last woman was actually killed by Jack the Ripper or not. And I kind of agree on the side that is thinking not, based on what you learn about here. Like I think, with forensic profiling and stuff, and such this today, I don't think they would have been classed together. I think definitely maybe something else happened to that last woman. So it is kind of interesting, and I would be interested in maybe seeing somebody who has like background, like if there's a book out there, maybe somebody that has background in like psychological profiling and such. Um, Maybe their take, like if they've written a book about this or not, because I definitely would be interested. So that was, like I said, the top read of the month. So that's it for star ratings. I do rate the top three. Top three is not the same as star rating. Star rating is strictly on enjoyment, where the top three is impact, basically. So the top spot is the five, top spot in both places, and that's because of the focus on the women. Like I do think, as a society as a whole, like even around the world, like we focus on the serial killers and not on the victims, and that's kind of a shame. Like the people who did the crime shouldn't get all that notoriety. I liked how she took us from their birth and even before, like their parents or situation, to their death. Like the way that was laid out, I really enjoyed. It really brought a humanity to these women. There was one woman in particular that I didn't like. Like, I understand alcoholism is a disease, but just kind of some of the choices she made, um, was really sad to see. And you kind of think about her husband. She had a really good husband. And so you think about her husband and her kids, and it's really sad. So I really like how even like people would look down, and they were labeled as prostitutes too. And so people look down like they're not as worthy as like maybe if it was an upper class woman that had been murdered, so people look down on them. So I really like how the author, by breaking down their lives like she did, really showed you, they were daughters, they were sisters, they were mothers, like they were wives. And I really like how she did that and really brought that humanity to people that someone looked down upon. And like I said, the one woman, I wasn't particularly fond of her because of the choices she made. So I thought that was really cool. And then just the historical look at how life was during that time. I thought the author, the way she included that and kind of weaved it in, was really well done. Next, my second top one was You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty by Ekwaeke Emezi. So even though I didn't love the character on that one, like I said, the writing was just so good. I really, really enjoyed. So the writing style and the way she wrote the descriptions, like I said, of the food. The one is a chef. Her love interest, the main character's love interest, is a chef in there. So the way she was describing the food and like the scenery and such, like it was just really beautifully written. And I really liked the writing style and the pacing and everything else about it. The way the author handled the topic of grief, I thought she did that very, very well. Really captured it. The moral questions, because it is one age gap to, sort of her ex's father. The way, that you have those morality questions, like what is okay and what's okay to grasp after grief, um, even if it's not necessarily what society would deem as okay, what is okay if it makes you feel alive again, kind of things. So, and then also the darkness to it. So the um, main character is an artist, and her art revolves around grief and just kind of like, I mean, grief is dark, but just where the author went with that, like I kind of like that dark side of the ugliness and the darkness of life and death and everything like that. So I really enjoyed that aspect as well, which I didn't mention before. The third one, as far as top three for impact, was actually A Walk in the Woods. So even though I gave it 3 stars, it's still in my top three. And I just love anything that has a nature aspect. So anything that deals with like conservation or national parks and anything like that, I absolutely love. So I really enjoyed that. I liked his interpretation of success. Because he didn't walk like the whole trail. There was kind of, him and his friend debated a little bit about, when to stop and everything like that. And I liked how he interpreted, because his friend was like, we walked it. Like, we may not walk the whole thing, but we walked the trail. And so I really like kind of that interpretation. Like, they did way more than many people would have or could have. And so I really like kind of that interpretation. The history on the parks, like why sometimes it got a little, a lot. I did actually like that aspect of it. I liked learning a little bit more about the history of the parks and when they were created and everything like that. And then just the people he met along the way, I think that's, I mean, he didn't like deep dive into that, but there was definitely several characters that he mentioned that they had met along the way. And I find that really, really interesting as well. Like, it just, I'm not a social person. So to me, like, sharing this space, like not only not having your own space, like being out in the wilderness, but then having to share space with like random strangers. Like, I don't know, like just the concept of it boggles me, but at the same time it really intrigues me as well, because how cool, like you can meet such interesting people. I did do I went to the thrift store again, and I also bought a couple books for my birthday. So total, I ended up hauling 40 books. But yeah, that's it for my wrap up. I still managed to have a long one, even though I didn't read as much. So there you go. Anyway, let me know what your favorite book from August was, if you've read any of the books I've mentioned, if any of the ones I didn't get to, if I should prioritize and try to get on a TBR or add as an extra, or if you're interested in reading any of these books. Definitely let me know down below. And if you're not sure what to say, or you just want to let me know you were here, you can always leave a rabbit emoji or any kind of animal, really. And I'm going to go ahead and leave you guys here. Happy reading, everyone. Bye.